Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our webinar this afternoon. We are talking today about auto-classifying the 3 R's, rot, records, and retention. It's an oldie, but a goodie. It's something that we've kind of maintained, kind of the theme that we maintained in our series throughout the last few years. And it's always proved to be such a popular topic. So welcome. You are here. I can't believe we're the middle of March already, but here we are, March 18th. If you have missed any of our webinars this year or in years past, you can see everything on valoratech.com, and you can also register for any upcoming webinars. So I would encourage you to do that if you are interested. By way of introduction, my name is Jen Nelson. I'm the VP of Strategic Solutions here at Valora Technologies, and joining me is my friend Sandy Serkis, who is co-founder and CEO. So thank you for joining us again. A little bit about Valora. If you are new to Valora, I know we've got a lot of familiar faces on the call, and we love to see it, believe me. If you are new to Valora, we offer an auto-classification platform for information governance and lifecycle management. And it is a tool that uses auto-classification technology and machine learning to help automate the discovery, the identification and classification, and then the eventual defensible disposition of content, regardless of where it lives across the enterprise. And it's usually used by IG teams, records teams, IT teams, legal teams, and the benefit to it is bringing multiple enterprise repositories and IG use cases into a single view, under a single umbrella. So that's really where a little bit about us and a little bit about you. We always ask when you register, and I really do enjoy seeing everyone's responses. This does change from webinar to webinar, so I do update it. But around the table today, we've got lots of folks in records and IM, which of course we expect. So welcome. Lots of people from legal compliance and data privacy and security. And then I never know who the other is. So if you are the other, let us know what group you belong to. We usually ask too, what are your main challenges? I love this question because everyone who's on the call today kind of has the same challenges. We're talking about rot, file cleanup, dark data, managing retention policies, and automating some workflows. And then the classic OMG everything is always popular. So we welcome your comments and your questions about any of these things. Today we are focusing on rot, records, and retention. So hang on to your hats. A little housekeeping before we start. So Q&A. So Sandy and I, we kind of throw this back and forth. If you've ever been to a Valora webinar before, we're quite cash. So please don't hesitate to interrupt. I wouldn't even say interrupt, to ask a question in the chat or the Q&A. One of us will see it. One of us isn't seeing it, but one of us will see it. I'm just going to try to. You'll see it. Okay. I can see it now. I can see the chat. So one of us will respond, and the other will, kind of interrupt the other to ask questions in real time. So if you think of it and you want to put it in the chat, we'll answer it as we go, or we can answer at the end. As per usual, I will send out the recording and the slides to this after the fact. Probably you'll see that in your inbox tomorrow morning. And of course, we welcome feedback. Any comments or suggestions you might have for upcoming webinars, we are more than open to it. So welcome. So we have got a packed agenda. It is 1:05, so we've got 55 minutes, and I think we've got lots of stuff to get through. So we're gonna see how we do. Our agenda today is just like the promise on the tin. We're going to talk about AutoClassification 101, auto-classifying rot, records, retention, and then how most organizations, or how you can get started in your organization. So let's start with AutoClassification 101. Now, we know this call is full of IG experts. So we do not want to, we will start at the beginning with metadata, but what is classification? Of course, we all know what metadata is. And Sandy, you have such a nice way of saying metadata is a love note to the future. Tell us a little bit about that, because I just love that.
Yeah, and I was looking over this slide. This is a slide that we made a while ago already, and we always use it because it's so on point. You do the work to extract and create metadata today so that you can use it tomorrow. The difference is, I think we have arrived at tomorrow. We are here in the age of AI. AI loves metadata, and we're so thankful that we were all so smart 10, 15 years ago and got metadata for everything, right? Or are we just catching up real quick? Either way, I believe that it's sort of love note to the now. We might want to change this slide just a wee bit.
Yeah, I love that. I just think it's so cute. And when you're classifying and obviously applying metadata to things, you can classify manually. And God love you, there are still some organizations that do that, that push that responsibility down to their employees. But is that the best use of your organization's time and resources? We know the answer is absolutely not. And why do we not? Oh, sorry,
Jen,
go ahead,
can
Sandy.
I just inject something there? Will you go back one slide? Because this is something that we see all the time, is that organizations used to, maybe once upon a time, require everyone to classify manually. And so they put together these massive schemas and these documents and these catalogs about how exactly we're going to classify everything. And they've made the leap, wow, we have so much data, we have no time, we need to automate the process. They've made the leap to understanding that you have to do this in an automated electronic fashion, but they haven't made the leap to updating the schema or updating the classification catalog to reflect the way an automated system would work as opposed to the way a human would work. So you don't just get to change the rules of the game, but not change the instruction manual. So I want to put that out there. If your organizations are in that sort of juncture where you're ready to start thinking about automation, understand that you're probably going to need to change your schema a little bit. Don't just think you just throw that over the fence to the automation tool and everything will work out. There's going to have to be a rationalization that takes place. And you'll see that as this webinar unfolds.
Good point. That leads us to the why not humans? Why don't we want humans doing things like this? And obviously very prone to human error. You can't hire enough people to be able to do this efficiently now with the amount of data that we're producing as organizations. There is a compliance risk to having humans do that because of errors, and we don't really know what that person was thinking when they did that. And then, of course, there's a limited audibility there with that lack of transparency. What I call dark pink, Sandy calls light red. So there's so much kind of leeway when you're relying on humans. Whereas when you are using an auto classification or technology to do that, the consistency is every single time, very easy to scale, and it reduces risk, and it's fully auditable, traceable, and defensible as well. And it obviously, when you say, yeah, it reduces cost and it reduces time, well, of course it does. But when you actually put the numbers together and kind of do the math behind how many humans would I have to hire to be able to do this, it is a little astronomical, because it is, if we think of an organization that's been in business for 20 years with 1,000 people, you would have a backlog of about, 438 million documents, which would take, over 1,500 employee years to just get through the backlog, not to mention, what we're producing today and tomorrow. And who's going to go to their HR and say, I'm going to need a head count of approximately 329 humans that are going to come in and be able to do that for me, knowing that there's going to be human error, that you're not going to be able to scale. There's a compliance risk with that. Like, it's just not feasible. It is not feasible in this day and age. So, using and employing technology or automation will absolutely reduce rot. It's going to reduce time. It's going to reduce your storage costs for sure. And you don't need to we are far past the days of asking humans to do this task. So with auto classification, when we say true auto classification, we are actually talking about the software doing it. We are not asking humans to make those decisions for us. With any kind of automation, there is always going to be a human in the loop, but it is absolutely the software that is performing that analysis and determination, and then the action of what it's going to be doing. So what is this file? What do I do with it? And then do something with it. So how it does that, if you've seen a Valora webinar before, or you're familiar with this is there will be a quiz, because you're going to know this inside and out. But how we do that is applying the file and rich metadata attributes with recognition algorithms, and then the disposition algorithm. So first, those file attributes that live in the file will become that rich metadata. So when we're looking at a file, say in a file share, the system generated metadata is often what you will see, which is created date, created by, last access date, which really doesn't tell us anything about what's in it. So when an automation tool like a Valora, an auto classification tool, goes in, it will do a full text analysis and start to then pull out those data nuggets. So, if it's a contract, we don't care if Jen opened it yesterday. If it's a contract, we care about the effective date or the renewal date or the termination date, as an example. So it's going to pull out those pieces of metadata and apply that as rich metadata, and then look with its recognition algorithms to say, oh, actually, this is a contract. It's not a resume. It's not a balance sheet. It's a contract. So it will determine the document type based on your records retention schedules and what you call your record classes and whatnot. And then the disposition algorithm. So if it's this and it looks like this, and so and whatever else, do this. So if it's a contract, an employment contract as an example, mark it as confidential, move it to the appropriate place in SharePoint, retain it for 8 years after the person's terminated. And before that record comes up for expiration, let's make sure that we get HR's approval before we delete it. So it's really that soup to nuts lifecycle management. And when we defensively delete something or defensively disposition something, we can do that in a few ways. And we'll get into how we do that a little later on when we talk about retention and disposition. But there's a lot of things we can do there. We can remove it, of course. We can tag it. We can migrate it. We can report on it. We can redact it. We can hold it. Whatever we need to do with it, we're going to rely on the system to do that. Again, kind of taking that lift off of our human teams. So a question we're asked often is auto classification AI? And I'll let you take this one, Sandy, if you want.
Sure. The answer is yes. Auto classification is a type of AI, but before we just broad brushstroke that, to understand the different types of AI, a lot of people think AI was born like a year or two ago, and that's not true. It's been around for a long time. Particularly machine learning has been around, believe it or not, since the 60s. What has made it more palatable lately is two big things. One is the advent of far more computing power, notably in the cloud, and also the ability to have this kind of interaction with it, the chat GPT aspect to it. That's the generative AI in the bottom left-hand corner. So it helps to understand what these different types are. So machine learning is a subset of AI that kind of focuses on the development of algorithms and statistical models that are essentially using predictive analytics to weigh different outcomes and come up with a confidence level that XYZ is the situation. That is predominantly the technique that Valora uses, although we are moving into some of these other areas. But machine learning, because of the way it works, it is very highly defensible because it tracks its actions and it shows its exact calibration and weighting and confidence scoring and sort of the mathematical underpinnings of the decision making. So that becomes a defensible technique. It's not just a black box, well, because I said so. And that orange box that Jen has kind of put around machine learning and extractive AI, which I'll explain in a second, both of those are in that defensible category because they show kind of like their thinking pattern in a mathematical way. It's very easy and logical to follow that. It's very repeatable. So extractive AI, basically, it tends to be the natural language processing camp, and they are designed to extract specific information from large data sets. If you've heard the term RAG, for retrieval augmented generation, RAG is kind of gently crossing the line between extractive and generative, but it is technically extractive. So those two technologies, we highlight those, and Valora particularly, we tend to stick in that category because it's very defensible, it's repeatable, you can show exactly how the decision was made, and you can change the structure, the weightings, the confidences and things to create different outcomes in a predictable fashion. Once you cross that line and go into the two lower ones, generative AI, that's your Claude, your Anthropic, where it is basically kind of creating its own universe. It's interpolating from what it's been trained on. So it is limited to what it's been trained on. And that includes when that training took place. And it is limited in that it doesn't necessarily know what is truly correct or not. And that is where the hallucinations come from. And then we get into agentic AI. If you're not familiar, the key word in there is agent. And what agentic does is basically take actions on behalf of the user. And you see it show up like, would you like me to go ahead and make that reservation for you? Would you like me to go ahead and buy those tickets for you? That is agentic AI. It's taking the generative aspect and then going one further and taking an action on it. So we do talk about actioning a lot in Valora, but we're not using agentic AI to do that. I want to make that clear. It is in Valora's world, it is user-driven, human-driven action that's taking place. It's not agentic. One day will we get there? Probably, but there are, as you all well know, there are some concerns with these two lower techniques that make them less defensible, and so we have a very light touch on both of those.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. When we go through and auto-classify a document, I'll show you how that's done or what the system's doing in the background. Quite often you'll see system-generated metadata when you log into your file share, your SharePoint, whatever. SharePoint is actually good. You can store some metadata in there, but usually you're kind of blind with the title, the type, the size, and the date modified. So what the software does will open a document, each document, and it will do that full text analysis, and it will read it, and it will start pulling out those details. So identifying the document type, in this case, we're talking pharmaceutical stuff. So it's an informed consent form. What's the drug name? What's the trial? What's the trial phase? Who are the people involved? Who's the investigator? Who's the patient? Anything else that we need to know? Oh yeah, we need to know it's a date executed because it's a consent form. So the system will pull out that rich metadata, and then it will be the decisioning, the machine learning decision that will determine what these things are. Well, it's a record type because it's a consent form. It's clinical trial, belongs to that record class, the retention based on the record retention schedules and policies. It will define the sensitivity classification as confidential because it's got personally identifiable information in here. What happens when this expires? The handling will need to delete after some kind of authorization, and we would kind of work that into workflows. And then, is this document eligible, and is it appropriate for training AI engines or LLMs? And the answer for this case would be no, because it's got someone's personal data, and we're talking about patient data specifically for a trial in this example. So we keep it, retain it until the December 14th, 2031, and then it's eligible for deletion. So that's an example of auto-classifying a document when in an unstructured format. When we think of structured data, we kind of do the same thing. So in this example is like an Excel output from a database, but we would usually connect right to the database, just like we would do to any other data source. And we're auto-classifying the fielded data within that database record. But what we're going to do is keep that record data together. So when humans now interact with this 300,000 line database, we're able to actually interact with it. So it makes a very user-friendly, we call it a mockument, a user-friendly way for humans to interact with huge structured data bases to be able to still apply retention and disposition to information that lives in structured systems. So that's how we kind of do things at the structured data level. And then at the enterprise level, we take into consideration any kind of data repository that you may want to look for raw records and then apply retention, because it's not only usually the IG team, but it could be compliance, it could be legal, it could be IT to say, what do we even have out here? Like, what is out there? What's the risk of having this kind of unknown dark data out there that we don't really know about? What policies do we apply? Who has access? All of that. So we find that most organizations, it's not just the IT team asking these questions. You've got friends in other places that are asking those as well. So from an enterprise approach, we will kind of take it just like we would any kind of little system. So we'd look for, first in our 5-step approach, take that data discovery. So scan those multiple repositories and see what's out there. And then do that full text content analysis of everything, every row in a database, every field in a database, every document in an unstructured, to be able to auto-classify, to say this is Jen's resume, or this is employment agreement. And then the defensible disposition. So if it's Jen's resume and she's an employee, keep it here. If it's Jen's resume and she interviewed and did not get hired, we have to treat it a little differently. So put it here, keep it for this amount of time. So being able to apply that defensible disposition, the rules and the algorithms on that, where it lives is extremely helpful. And then we go back and do it all over again. We are creating just loads of data every day. So every time something is changed in a repository, every time something is newly created in a repository, the system will go back and say, oh, here's something new, here's something changed, and apply all of these steps to everything, so that you eventually get to a near real-time view of all of your data. It's really the beautiful thing about having an auto-classification tool, is it's bringing not only these all these repositories, but then you start to get these multiple use cases that you can use it as well. You don't only have to use it for retention. And we find that most businesses, these are kind of the 6 big buckets.
Actually, Jen, can I go back one?
Of course.
Because I want to mention something that happened all last week, and it's on that SaaS web apps category right in the center. Because what we are hearing out and amongst all of you is that is becoming an increasingly painful situation, because the SaaS or web app is effectively owning or controlling or throttling your own data just because of the fact that they are hosting it for you, and that is preventing our clients from being able to truly access their own data, analyze their own data, use it for AI, use it for retention. And what you're seeing is, I think, a little bit of a power play between the third-party apps and the clients themselves. Who actually owns this data? Who is the keeper of this data? And I would put it to all of you that it's you. It's your data. You're responsible. You hold the legal liability, not your SaaS vendor, for proper retention, for compliance, for data privacy, all of those things. So if you are getting that kind of runaround or that pushback from your third-party app, it's time to really bring that to the fore, because that is not really going to fly going forward. And fortunately, Valora, and I'm sure there are others, we have techniques to go into those third-party apps, get your data, analyze it once removed, and sort of provide that information back to you, and then manipulate your data in those environments. That's one of the things that we bring to the table. It's sort of a byproduct of what we do naturally, but it is becoming a very helpful and kind of selling point, because it is allowing our clients to actually take control of their data in these third-party systems. And then furthermore, just to put that icing on the cake here, it helps them reduce the cost structure with those third-party, because they're able to start deleting all that extra junk, all that past retention stuff that's just floating around in that third-party app that they're paying hosting charges on. So again, if you're looking for that ROI, there's a really easy way to do it with your third-party apps.
Yeah, amazing. I would say how are other businesses using auto-classification? And these are the 6 biggest categories that we see, because once you know what your data is, where it is, what you should do with it, identify the information nuggets in there. Does it contain PII? Does it contain client data? there's a lot of things you can do there. So the first certainly is data discovery and classification. What even do I have? Where is it? How long do I keep it? When should it be managed? All of that stuff. The second is rot and file cleanup. So the ability to go find the rot and actually do something with it. The third is records management. So the ability to automate and manage records retention with a tool. Data privacy and governance, risk and compliance, obviously by the ability to find and redact personal data, PII, PHI, and other sensitive information. Certainly legal hold and e-discovery. Once you know where everything is and what it is, if you have if you need to put something under hold or have an e-discovery event, a very easy way to search your entire data set. And then, of course, AI readiness to identify what is appropriate to teach an LLM and what should not be used in that regard. And most, I'm going to skip over this slide quite quickly, but the benefits of using auto classification are kind of self-evident after we kind of talked about that a little bit. It's defensible, creates that automated instruction, certainly reduces risk. It's easy data collection, and it is evergreen. You know that on any given day that you are in compliance with your own policies and any kind of industry regulations that you may be privy to. And that's the difference between what we call observational versus operational governance. Sandy, if you want to take that.
Oh, sorry, I was answering a question. So we have been kind of changing a little bit how we describe what Valora does. And this kind of messaging was suggested to Jen and me, and we really, really like this. So we're going to try it out on all of you today. Please give us a thumbs up, thumbs down. Let us know what you think. But the idea is that a lot of the information governance tools and techniques heretofore have been observational in nature. In other words, it'll give you a report. Here's all your rot. Have a nice day. Here's all your files. It's an inventory or a data map. Have a nice day. And the onus then went on you as IG managers or record managers or go forth and reduce. But there was no mechanism to take action. There was no tools to take action. You were really just kind of left with this, this kind of guidebook, go figure it out. And what we have always been about is trying to give you the actual tools to take those actions. That's why we focus so much on disposition and why we have tried to make the definition of the word disposition mean actioning, not just retention period, but anything. We at Valora would consider redacting a document to be a form of disposition, to be quarantining a document to be a form of disposition, to be producing it for litigation purpose, to be a form of disposition. So when we talk about operational governance, we mean actually actioning or dispositioning. It may mean remediate, and I'm looking at this generally realizing it may not necessarily only be remediating. It may just be doing day-to-day normal, not problematic fixing. It may just be doing, like time has passed and now these things are past retention. Is that remediating? Maybe, maybe not. But the point is actually having actions being taken on this data so that it is up to date, it is in compliance across all these different parameters at all times, and with a regular cadence that you can set and count on and check and audit and all of those things. To me, that differential, the difference is, here's a report on kind of like the state of the universe at any given moment. That's the left side. Whereas the right side is, this is, yes, the state of the universe at all moments, as well as complete life cycle management. You have that assurance that the actions are being taken and that you are up to date and up to speed and in compliance. That's the difference. And what we keep hearing from everybody is either, yes, 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 I want those tools. I need to be able to do that, or do it for us and show us, prove that it is taking place. So we're kind of covering both angles there.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's talk about rot. The first of the three R's. What is rot? Of course, for folks on the call, we deal with ROT every day. So redundant, obsolete, and trivial. And what we do is really focus on finding and identifying that so that we can segregate and or action or quarantine or delete to separate those documents that have true business value. It doesn't have to be a record, but it has to not be ROT. So when we look for ROT, we're looking for redundant information, duplicates, backup databases, things like that. Obsolete data, so things that are past retention, versions, old versions that are no longer relevant. And then trivial information. So your aunt's banana bread recipe and my cousin's wedding photos and spam and things that shouldn't really be on maybe my OneDrive or my shared drive. And we have introduced or floated the idea of a fourth inappropriate material, which could be off-color content, which could be offensive, could be, I don't actually know how we got this. We're really not supposed to have it. So, yep.
Sorry, you stalled out for a second. No, you're good. You're back. And you stalled out again.
Am I here? Am I live? Am I paused?
Now you're back.
I'm back. Thank you. It's my internet. I'm not going to blame anybody else but my internet provider. So these are our kind of three categories. So is it roti? Is it riot? I'm not sure, but we look for all of these kinds of data when we're trying to discern, again, content that has business value from that, which does not. And I don't know, Sandy, you just jump in whenever you want, but what is the risk of kind of holding on to all that data? And depending on what study you read, between 40 and 70% of content that we are actively storing today is considered redundant, obsolete, or trivial. And we know that is such a cost burden on storage and maintenance, and it's an IT team's headache, certainly in lost productivity when you are looking for things. Am I working with the right version? We don't really know. And then, of course, that risk and exposure, the data governance risk. I don't even know what this is or where it is or if I'm protecting it properly. The privacy risk, of course, does it contain someone's PII? Is somebody's tax form sitting out like willy-nilly in the file share? And then certainly a compliance risk. Do I have this when it should have been deleted? Or does this exist, of course, when it shouldn't? So all very important and very real risk factors as well.
And Jen, I'll add one more, which is when ROT is maintained and present in the data sources, and then that becomes the training ground for AI, then your AI is being trained on ROT. It is expressly being trained on data that is out of date, that is incorrect, that is potentially offensive or ill-gotten. That is the last thing that you want your AI trained on. You always want to clean your data before you have your AI train across. And so the risk and exposure becomes magnified as soon as you start using AI.
Mm-hmm. Totally. One of the easiest places to start is duplicates. Because it's easy, it's fast ROI, because you can say, we already have this, and these are absolute duplicates. We take a kind of an extended approach to duplicates. Exact duplicates, of course, we want to get rid of, or at least identify. So at least we know what the potential is to get rid of. So when we look for exact duplicates, we are looking for a forensic hash match to two documents that are identical, but we take that kind of two steps further. We look for functional duplicates, which is 99% dupe. So it's a 100% content match, but the files don't match. So if I'm saving something from a doc to a PDF, it looks the same, but doesn't exist as the same. So we're looking for functional dupes. And then we also have the option to look for near duplicates. So these are similar files in nature. It could be maybe a form letter, like a change of address to, 140,000 clients. Same content. The only thing that changes is the name and address. So that could be considered a near duplicate, or maybe different versions of a document could be considered a near dupe. So if that's something that's important to you to identify, that's something that we can pull out. And when we're auto-classifying ROT, this is an easy one because we look for, keywords: happy birthday, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. We can see that this is very old. There's no further content. It's heavy on graphics. And with the best of intentions, I sent this to 4,000 people. So we've got 4,000 identical copies sitting in everybody's email. So it's very easy to say, this is rot because why, and how do we handle it? And when looking at and kind of thinking how we're pulling all that data into this single pane of glass, it's very easy to then visualize my rot from my content that has business value. So is this file rot? Yes or no? If so, what type? Redundant, obsolete, or trivial? And then that detail. These are redundant because these are identical duplicates. And these are obsolete because these are the ones that are past retention. So it's very easy not only to visualize, again, that observational governance, but then to action and operationalize the removal or the quarantining of these kinds of documents. And let's move on to records. Sandy, may I pass the baton?
Oh, sorry, I'm answering questions again. Yes.
That's okay. I can see questions, but I can't see them because I don't.
No, that's okay. Keep the questions coming. We love them. So at some point, we kind of came up with this concept of retention as a spectrum, because what I tend to hear out there is retention as a black and white line, either retain or don't retain. And the truth is, the reason that we still have so much stuff out there that we're itchy, nervous, whatever to get rid of is because it's not a clean black and white situation. There is a big gray zone. So let's kind of explain that. We have the bookmarks. We have the black and white edges, right? Is it rot? Is it junk? Well, then, yeah, remove that promptly. Is it a permanent record? Well, then don't be removing that ever. Okay, those are the cut and dry situations. The problem is, what's the squishy middle, right? So you have things like legal hold, right? So yes, of course, while it's under legal hold, you should not be disposing of that, even if it's past retention or what have you, or even if it's rot, but it's under legal hold. The problem is organizations are a little bit loose, I'll say, about ever lifting the legal hold or forgetting to lift the legal hold. So things stay on legal hold forever, well past the time frame that the case matter was active. And that's a problem. That's a non-compliant situation. And you really should be taking your organizations to task in that situation, because that is not good, clean data hygiene. Be that as it may, legal hold needs to get a little bit more structure around it. When does it start? We're good about start. When does it end? And what happens upon that ending? And that's where we're going to get into this in a moment about triggers that should trigger deletion, that it either happen after they've occurred, or you can set up in the event that they will occur. So legal hold is a good example of that. And on the other, its kind of counterpart is a DSAR, data subject access request, or a data privacy request, where we're supposed to remove on demand, where the data subject says, I'd like you to forget about me. I'd like you to lose everything that you have on me. You usually have 35, 45 days, something like that, to comply. So that is a situation that has a trigger, that has a start, that has an end, and the data needs to be excised in that time frame. And then in the middle, we have this kind of, well, the data is active, it's being used. When do we keep it? When do we remove it? And that's going to kind of depend on its use and its circumstance and its record class and so on. So we find it helpful to think of this spectrum and then to build the disposition rules around that spectrum.
Mm-hmm. And it allows for this kind of top-down versus bottom-up approach, or bottom-up versus top-down, because most organizations, again, when we're relying on humans implementing the rules down to groups or team leads or department heads, make it fit into these categories, and please manually classify this appropriately, correctly at all times. And the onus is on the employees who don't do this every day, don't classify things, don't really get it. And those non-records are managed by time. If it's, if you've got got like a 30-day retention in your inbox or something. Doesn't matter what's in there, bam, it's gone. Well, wouldn't it be helpful if we understood what that information was so that we can apply this kind of bottom-up approach? Identify if this thing that I'm looking at, this file, has value, and then handle it appropriately from there. The onus is then on the centralized IG team to be able to create those policies and have a way to enforce those policies out. So we're not relying on our colleagues or people who you just kind of know aren't really going to do it when you ask them nicely to classify everything in their department. And those non-records are managed by the value of the content over time, which help, of course, is part of the automation. And the way that we do this in an automated way is pulling directly from those rules and policies in your records retention schedule. So it's kind of just visually like that. Imagine having everything in your enterprise, all of your data, kind of it's this, and it's like a giant mail sorter, for lack of a better analogy. Tagging everything appropriately and seeing it through for the rest of its life cycle. Do you want to pick up, Sandy? You don't have to. Are you typing?
I'm going in.
Are you typing? Okay.
No, you go ahead. Keep going.
Okay, good. Okay. So main records and information management use cases are certainly to identifying and tagging content with that rich metadata. And we talked about that. What are records versus content of business value versus rot and junk, and what can we get rid of safely? The second, absolutely setting up for that disposition and lifecycle management, being able to tag records when this expires. What are the trigger dates? Not the last open date or the created date, but what's that date, the effective date or the renewal date or the termination date that we're looking for? And then that advanced lifecycle management is also taking into consideration everything else you need: DSAR requests, legal holds, other preservation holds, making sure that you're allowing for and accounting for those kind of like outlier cases where you're not just cut and dry, black and white, data management or retention. Something that we're also asked about as well is, that's awesome, but how do you incorporate for your physical storage that you're still storing? And there is a way to do that. And I'm not going to get into it too much today, but there is a way to visualize, just like we're visualizing all of our different repositories and data, to be able to do the same thing and visualize our stored physical records in the same way by taking that from your the Iron Mountains of the world, and creating a document of what's in this box. So digitally, the human on this side, when maybe I've got a DSAR request or I've got a legal hold about something, I can do a federated search across all of my electronic files and all of my physical files as well. And it's a nice way to be able to see that and incorporate those kinds of physical records into our electronic records management as well. And when we're looking at AutoClassifying,
that is like the thing I was mentioning earlier about being somewhat held captive by your third-party providers. Iron Mountain is sort of famous for this. That was a great example of how to take back some control there.
Yeah, take back control.
Take back control of your own actual files.
Of your own stuff. And then when you get to the end of, when you can see it visually, looking to see, there's my record classes, quickly see my retention periods, quickly see my expiration handling, doesn't that go a long way to know that you are compliant and to be confident that everything is kind of in its place?
Okay, so this is, we wanted to kind of show you what do we mean by operational governance. So in our newest release, literally coming out next week, we have a bunch of nifty new features. Some of them have obviously we've always had this, ability. I want to make a mass deletion. I want to, choose my subset. I want everything that's past retention in the marketing drive, older than 5 years, blah, 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 whatever parameters you want to set up. All right, I'm ready to mass delete. We've always had that, and that's that left category. Of course, that stays. But what we're adding in now is the ability for the users with the correct permissions, which would presumably be the IG team, to set up different triggers and circumstances where auto deletion can occur. So doing things like, if the files meet these criteria, you can set it up for a regular cadence. I want you to check every 90 days, anything past retention, anything rot, go ahead and sweep. Or you can do this, and I love this, you can set up pre-triggers, and I kind of hinted at this before, which is when that legal hold finally gets lifted, I want you to go ahead and auto-delete anything that was under that legal hold but was past retention or has become past retention in the 4.5 years that that was under legal hold, very likely. So you can set these up, you can pre-approve, you can send them through an approval workflow, you can pre-schedule them, and they're all in there, and they'll show their pending status until the situation, till the trigger hits, and then they execute. So you can set up something today that's going to take effect throughout the course of the year. It's very cool. If you're interested in a demo of that, let us know. I won't be able to demo it to you until next week, but it's fabulous. And that works, by the way, that works for deletion, that works for migration, that works for quarantining, and then my favorite new one, it also works for what we call securing. In other words, for locking down files. I want you to lock down files when this trigger situation hits. What's the common trigger? When this employee is terminated, lock down their files and send them over there. This is the kind of thing that you can set up from within Black Hat. And then the third column is, of course, you don't ever, like everything at Valora, you don't have to be all or nothing. You can have a hybrid approach. I want these kind of triggers to be automatic, or I want this kind of data to be automatic, but I want that to be totally manual, or I never want to touch that. You can have every mishmash combination that you want. And as a power user, you can, of course, set those up and change them anytime. So what I'm excited about is the ability to do all of these things. How you choose to implement them, that's what makes us all different.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And let's finally talk about the third R, retention.
You want me to take it?
Yes.
Sure. So
who's going to go first?
Yeah, I'll go. So we have made a bit of an art of retention here at Valora. And this has come about because we look at client, record retention schedules. And what we often see, you guys are great about these things. This is the record class. This is a definition. Here are some examples. And this is the time window, right? This is the retention period. You're great about that. What you're not as great about is what, and then what? And what happens when the day finally arrives? Do you just delete? Do you need some sort of workflow? Do you need 16 authorizations? Do you have to show a certificate of destruction? Like, what is the process that happens there? So we have separated these out into obsolescence date, or what you'll see inside Black Hat as expiration date. That's the phrase that we use. And then we have expiration handling, which is often a workflow. What happens when? And I was just talking about that, right? We can set up this automated workflow that goes through all those systems, but you have to know what that workflow is. And this is a good example when I was talking earlier in the conversation when I said your documentation or your policies need to roll forward to an automated, handling situation. The automation needs to know what is the expiration handling process, because it is going to execute those steps in sequence and document those actions. So we need that thought out, written down, architected. And so even though you might know, because typically probably you are the ones executing it, or you are the one directing IT, I want you to do this, I want you to terminate these files on this date, and then send me an email, and then loop in Barbara, you know all of that, but the systems don't. So that's what needs to get kind of added either into your retention schedule, or even as a separate type of what we call guidance documentation that says, this is what happens when these files reach their retention maximum.
Absolutely. And automating that retention handling, again, being able to visually see retention periods, expiration dates, and expiration handling, how we should do that, is very helpful. And what we're seeing here is a dashboard view of some retention handling metadata fields. And then what we see here is list view is a way to actually see it. The record class, the date of the document, the expiration date, retention period, expiration handling. Is it rot? Why is it rot? All of those metadata tags, it makes it an easy way that you can, IG teams, human teams, can visualize this giant amount of data. So it's very handy. When we talk about retention or disposition or the actioning of that, Sandy mentioned, we have many approaches to doing that, and quite often we'll meet you where you are with more so IT's comfort level in the disposition or actioning or moving content around different systems. Usually the IG team is like, yeah, absolutely, automate that sucker. And IT's like, whoa, whoa, whoa now. Like, we have our own processes and protocols to be able to delete swaths of data. So we respect that, and we kind of meet you where you are. So we can have the software agents, we can completely automate it and have the software agents take that action. Oh, this is, past retention, delete it. This is rot, delete it. This is up for approval, send it to Sandy for approval. Or we can have the client's IT team do that. So this is where the system would tell IT by way of, exported report or 30, 60, 90-day report or something to say, okay, IT, these are everything that needs to be moved to this location, or these are all the files that need to be removed because they are rot, they expired on this day, what, when, where, why, according to your schedule. And then there's a third option where we can do a hybrid approach based on maybe the location. If it's in the marketing drive and it's rot, go ahead and get rid of it. If it's in legal and you consider it rot, we're going to need some checks and balances there. So based on where it is or what it is, we can help folks through that in an automated way or a semi-automated way. But then there's also ways to help employees before you go and delete all their rot, to get them involved. And that is a way that, because, the hard part isn't deleting data. The hard part is, trying to delete the data, somebody's data out of their cold dead hands. So we help you through that and help employees through that by getting them involved to say, hey, Brenda, in your OneDrive, this is everything that's rot, all your cat photos, all your old stuff, all your takeout menus, everything that's been, over 15 years old, to help visualize that for people to say, oh yeah, actually, this doesn't belong in my OneDrive, or this is, rot. So helping people through that, we will absolutely help folks through that. And then with our 5 minutes left, how do you even get started? This is, when you look at it, when you're taking all of these different, siloed data repositories and you're like looking at it through a single pane of glass, it looks great on a slide, but actually, how do you get started? And how do you get that traction and that excitement from other people around you in other departments to get buy-in? And where we suggest starting with a use case. You can boil the ocean with this, legal hold, e-discovery, GRC, everything, but start with something that's painful for people, that's going to prove ROI. So start with that compelling use case that you're like, see the headaches this is going to, help solve for, but with always that eye to looking forward. And that's kind of where we help too, is if we know that you are dead set about, eliminating rot, but while we're doing that, let's always think about what we're going to be doing next or looking for next, or different use cases, not only for the IG group, but maybe for legal or for compliance or for IT. We absolutely measure results because you want to see especially if you're looking to replace or augment a process. Maybe it's in the knowledge management team looking for things. Maybe it's DSARs, maybe it's e-discovery, maybe it's pulling employee files. How are you doing things today? How long does that take you to go into 27 different systems and look for everything related to Jennifer Nelson? And then you're going to be able to benchmark to say, once we have a system like this in place, it took me, and we have clients that it was taking, they had a 3.5-week deadline to be able to do this. And now they do it in 3.5 seconds, which is a huge ROI. but then build on that success. Once you've got it, once the pilot's there, sharing is caring. So spreading the word internally and saying, hey guys, look what we're doing over here in IG. Look at all the, the cost savings, the time savings, energy, resources. Look what we can save by doing it this way. So that's usually the approach that we take. And, awesome. How long is that going to take? Like, the answer people hate, but it entirely depends on how much data you have, where it is, the complexity of your data, the amount of data. But usually you are up and running with a system like this within 12 weeks. Do you have your entire data set scanned in 12 weeks? Absolutely not. But you're starting that baseline processing, because it's going to take some time, depending on how much data you have, again, to go through and process all of that. And again, through that phased approach, we take you through planning, we do that proof of concept or pilot, and then into a full implementation. So we baby step into it. Again, no one needs to boil the ocean on day one, but we're going to work with you to help guide you and help prioritize where we go, what we do, and where we go next, so that your team is comfortable, that the rest of the organization is comfortable, and that we've got a plan and a roadmap for how to kind of boil the ocean eventually. And we are at 1:57, and I would invite, and again, I apologize, maybe Sandy, you can tell me if there's any questions that have come in or anything that we'd like to chat about, but I would welcome your questions now and we can answer them, or if there's any questions in there that we need a little discussion on.
Oh, there were quite a few questions. There's been a lively conversation the whole time. Thank you, everybody. Happy to take a few more. And I would love to hear if any of you have thoughts on this operational versus observational information governance. I would love to hear them. Did that resonate with you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's the coolest thing since.
Great. Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Enjoy your day.